What up, Fitty?
Hey, Mike.
How are you?
Good. I forgot to change the settings on here, so now I have to admit everyone as they come in. I always forget to do that.
That's what you get for not knowing your tech.
Yeah. I did 3 podcast recordings today, so I'm drained already.
Oh, good. We'll just have to bring the energy for you.
Yeah.
We got this. Are you in a dress or is that a tank top?
It's a tank top.
Okay. Say, I've never seen you that dressed up before.
Yeah, no, I have sweatpants on.
Okay. All right. Blue Blockbuster sweatpants?
No, actually, no, surprisingly not.
I love it. I somehow walked home with two full sets of the Blockbuster sweats.
You'll have to give one to Ryan because I think his were in the. Oh no, it was his hats that were stolen out of the back of the car.
Yeah, no, the photo he posted, they were wearing their Blockbuster sweatsuits.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, I gotta get that link. Okay, you guys, I put a link in the chat box there if you guys want to click on that. It's you guys do, Mike, you can explain better. Send out emails, newsletters, and you guys give a lot of real estate investing advice? Or?
Sometimes. Yeah,
I can explain.
Oh, hey, Tyler.
Tyler can answer that a little better than I can.
Yeah. It's a link that we love answering new questions, like rookie questions and or experience questions, but we love that engagement. So there's in that link there's an option to sign up for a weekly exchange with us for Q&A when you get stumped or want to know our opinion on something, and then Mike does a monthly Portland specific market update. So if there's anyone in your crew that is interested in the Portland market, he's got some of the best information there is on our real estate market.
This might be a good next step for you guys with this ending in a couple weeks to talk to Tyler and find out all the advice I gave you guys was wrong.
Yeah, tell me what Ashley said, and then I'll try to come out with the devil's advocate opinion.
Okay, you guys can go ahead and get started. Did you guys have a presentation you're doing? Or no?
Us?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I thought you were doing a presentation. Okay. We have some people that do a presentation, some that do Q&A. So I'll start off with just if you guys each want to go first and tell us about how you got started in real estate.
Sure, Mike, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I lucked out. So when I was playing catch in the backyard with my uncle back in 1997, early 1997, and I was a senior in high school. I had no clue what I wanted to do, and he jokingly said, "You should come work for me." He was an appraiser in Portland, and so I actually took him up on that, and so then he had to hire me. So I went from a senior in high school working weekends as an assistant property appraiser to licensed appraiser. In 97, bought my first house in 2002. It was a short sale, and then I house hacked it. Didn't know what a short sale was, didn't know what house hacking was. And then that kind of got my start into real estate. Then I started an appraisal business in 2004, broke off with him, bought a handful of houses until the Great Recession. Learned a lot about what real cash flow is versus what tax return cash flow is. Had a short sale, had a bankruptcy, and then I got into real estate investing full time. Met Tyler in 2009. We partnered in 2010. So we've been flipping houses, doing land development, new construction, a lot of seller financing. We built a pretty good sized rental portfolio here in Portland together, a property management company and a brokerage. So we kind of do a lot of different things in real estate, but that's really mostly in the housing world of real estate.
Good. Tyler?
Yeah, well, so I got into real estate in 2009, right after the crash. And I kind of on a whim just started flipping one house with my roommate at the time, and then ended up getting into 3 flips before I had finished the first one. Quit my job way too soon, and then kind of had to sink or swim and get a flipping company off the ground. And so and then Mike and I actually met on Craigslist when I was trying to ditch one of my flips that had gone south and had some issues trying to sell it. And Mike met me, talked to me about the property, and then realized I was pretty much screwed on that. He wasn't going to touch it, but we started working together on other projects, and eventually became partners pretty soon after that. So that's how we met, and we started with the flipping, and then that kind of evolved into buying and holding and starting building our rental portfolio. And then everything else kind of came off of that investment activity. So I'm a principal broker and do a lot of the realty side of things. Mike is a licensed property manager. And so we kind of both have those elements of servicing our portfolio and our investing activities. And then we're both involved in the acquisitions and the financing and all the fun stuff in the investing realm.
I really want to dive into how you guys became partners and what that looked like. When you became partners, did you set up an LLC right away, put together a partnership agreement, or was it a handshake deal? And how did that kind of evolve into the business you have today?
We actually started with a partnership that was like part of a bigger group of other people. And so we were both kind of small cogs in a bigger machine. And the people running that company ended up being crooks, and we were kind of starting to see the writing on the wall, and we both kind of jumped ship at the same time. And so we were, I don't remember if we
You already
started
had
with a contract or not.
No, you already had it. So Tyler already had the S corp, so he had the entity set up, and he had already just bought his previous partner out. And so literally, I was a dumb person that didn't realize you should have contracts. So we'd had a handshake deal, and because Tyler is an amazing human being, just kind of honored that handshake. So that was August of 2011, and then I think I actually bought stock in 2014. So when we partnered up, we actually had a third partner. So Tyler had a handshake deal with me and the other partner. He wasn't living up to what we needed from him to be doing. So in 2014, we already had some LLCs, some rentals, and so we kind of bought him out of that. And at that time, I actually bought shares into the S corp. So for 3 years there, Tyler could have taken all the money and run, but
No, I think we did have like a project by project. We had contracts, but nothing on the overall like owning entity.
Yeah, there may have been a documented partnership agreement. There probably was, knowing Tyler.
Especially coming out of the nightmare that was the bigger company. I mean, everyone was on high alert, so there's no way we would have done it on a handshake.
So let's talk about that as to dating each other before becoming official business owners of a whole corporation. So what was that like? And do you recommend that to anybody that's getting into a partnership, is doing it, deal by deal, instead of just saying, okay, from now on out, every deal we do it together in this business?
Yeah, ours was a trial by fire. With this other company. So we had seen how the other person dealt when everything hit the fan, right? How like everyone's true colors came out when we realized that some people were stealing money out of the projects and lenders weren't going to get paid back. I mean, it's everyone's investing nightmare. And so you see, when people get their financial interests put in jeopardy, how are they going to act? And I was impressed with how Mike acted, how he focused on the future, and kind of stuck to his moral guns. And I think he was impressed with how I handled it as well. And so it allowed us to have context. We were able to prove what we could do. He was basically the one valuing, finding, and negotiating all the deals, and I was raising all the private capital. And so we're like, why do we need these other guys at all? And so we were able to prove ourselves, and we were able to see each other's character. And I think that I would never go into a partnership without being able to see those things, the performance and the character.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about real estate is you don't need to get married. You can date, right? So you can just do one deal together. You don't have to create an entire business together. And then once you have some successful deals, then you can look at starting a business. On our brokerage side, we do a lot of coaching. And so we've seen a lot of failed partnerships where they go in, they create an LLC, they have all these big plans, they do all these projects. One guy goes crazy, and then the other guy's stuck trying to buy him out in the middle of a closing. And so dating is a great way to get started and all that.
And there's a surprising amount of people that literally go insane in the real estate industry.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like literally
it's
insane.
Not an uncommon thing for your partner to literally go crazy.
Yeah. And then if dating went well, and then you decide to then partnership more like on a bigger business level, commit to doing multiple projects together, then you really have to have your goals in line with what you want to accomplish, and make sure any other distractions outside of that partnership are totally understood, right? Like you don't want to be in a partnership with someone and then they're running 2 or 3 other businesses, because if you're focused on this one partnership business, they have all these other opportunities. And one of the things that came out of that bad partnership that Tyler talked about was when that started going south, two partners ran everything. One of them was kind of a crook. The other guy was a complete crook. And so once it started going south, the complete crook started doing all these other partnerships. So he was like 1 foot out the door, leaving the bag with the other guy who was a partial crook, trying to clean everything up. So distractions are really, really huge in a partnership. So you got to make sure that what is the focus of the partnership? What are people doing on the outside of that? And is that going to handicap your ability to be successful? And if it is, you don't do it. And then the other thing on the partnership is 1 + 1 needs to equal more than 2, right? So there's no reason for you guys to join forces with someone if you're not getting a benefit of 3, 4, or 5. So you have to have complementary skill sets that allow you both to achieve more than if you were just working on it by yourselves.
How often do you guys have alignment meetings where you're talking about that stuff? Or is that just a continuous ongoing conversation? Or do you two have dates together still, even though you're married?
We have weekly sync up dates. It's usually just a phone call. And when we haven't historically always been really good at keeping those. And our staff sometimes comes to us and like begs us, hey, stop skipping those meetings, because the farther out of alignment we go, especially if you run a company with a lot of staff, it becomes like they're getting different directions from Mike or I didn't get an update from Mike on a project. And so I'm telling staff to do one thing because I'm going off of bad information. So it's very important for us to have at least a weekly meeting to sync up.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we do an annual like big picture vision kind of partnership, usually a retreat or something where we get away and we work on like big picture vision, making sure our business is serving our lifestyle and that we're getting what we need out of the partnership and getting what we need out of the business.
How do you guys handle if an opportunity or something comes up that you want to do on your own and bringing that up to the other partner? Or do you guys want to continue, or do you discuss everything together, or you want to continue? How does that happen if there was another opportunity that came up? Perhaps maybe someone approached you about partnering on a different deal or something.
Yeah, we haven't had that come up yet. We've got a pretty good, we've got a pretty wide buy box from a property type or structure type scenario in a very small locational thing. So like if Tyler's like, hey man, I want to take some of my money and go invest in the Midwest and buy cash flows, I don't think there'd really be, too much of a discussion there. So early on, we kind of had that discussion, is anything in the Portland market, anything that's in kind of our area, we're partners If an opportunity comes outside of that, then we can have the ability to have a discussion and see if we do want to partner on it first, and then the other person, if we don't want to partner, can go down that road and look at that opportunity.
And even if it was a project that was in the like outside of our geographic area, if it was an active investing project, we would need to get permission from the other person, because focus and distraction is everything. And we're at this point in our lives, we're both 100% committed to putting all of our work time into the companies that we have together. And if we were going to, like, there's not enough time in the day to handle what we have. So I can't imagine either one of us being okay with any non-passive commitment of time to anything else.
We recently did one of our whole sessions on partnerships, and we talked about communication between partners, and you guys kind of touched base on that, but also being able to understand and not being so down the line, as such as, okay, Tyler, your responsibilities are this in the business, Mike, these are yours, and we don't cross that line. We don't ever help each other or take the other person's responsibilities and duties. And one thing we talked about was when you're partnering with someone and maybe someone's doing the maintenance and repairs, and then they can't do it one day, but that's part of their equity is, doing those jobs. How do you guys handle that? As to Tyler, are you like, no, Mike, I'm not doing any property management. That's your job. How does that work for your guys' relationship? Is it making sure it stays fair, but helping each other out?
I think we kind of look at it as a Venn diagram, where you have the circles of responsibility with there's some being overlapping. And so because we have these other companies that provide like brokerage services and property management services, it's pretty easy to separate those things. Like I basically have full independence to run a couple of our companies, and Mike has a full independence to run the other couple of our companies. And then the investing is kind of the core of our business, the core of our business revenue driver. And that is where there is some overlap, even though we have distinct roles in that. There's, that most important core business, we do some of that stuff together. We have more overlap we have to have more agreement in the decisions we make in that camp.
And as we've gotten bigger, there's a lot more trust in all that, right? So as our property or our brokerage has gotten larger, and as our other service staff has gotten larger, so I manage our property management staff and our acquisition staff, and I've done more on the money raising. So there's scenarios where Tyler doesn't have, he's really very minimal insight into the acquisitions that we're doing. I raise the money, we get everything done. He just gets involved and does loan docs. So there's kind of that to it. But I'd say a statement I say a lot to people is that's a Tyler question. And I say that to staff all the time, which is that's a Tyler question. That's a Tyler question. On our brokerage, it's kind of coaching. So they come to me a lot for the real estate coaching, but then they need the principal broker advice from Tyler. So a lot of times it'll be, hey, that's a Tyler question. I imagine this is probably what he's going to say. Get confirmation from him. But so we do a pretty good job deferring and telling people you need to ask the appropriate person for that. And that's training your staff is they need to know who to go to, because you don't want end arounds where they go to mom, don't like the answer, and then they go to dad and ask for a different answer. And so that's where that's a Tyler question, that's a Mike question, really helps.
If you guys have questions too, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll read them off. But what would be your guys' advice to rookie investors that are looking to do their first partnership? How can they find a partner? Besides Craigslist, because I don't want any of these people going and meeting people on Craigslist.
Yeah. I think it has to do with, you start with the question of what do I need? What am I really, what do I hate doing? What am I bad at? What am I not capable or competent in? And start with that question, and then start looking for someone that can kind of fill that role that you don't want to be doing anymore.
And then the flip side of that is, what can I do really well and what value can I bring to the table? And so then when you are searching for that person to have a partnership from, or a mentor that you're trying to get into, some type of agreement with, that's where, so this is the value I have, and you bring value to the table. And the partner that you find should be the exact same scenario. They should know what their value is, and they're bringing their value to the table. And then it's that 1+1 = 3 equation. So you're bringing X amount, and they're bringing Y amount. Well, then that needs to provide value above and beyond what you can create for yourselves.
I'd say you just got to check your ego at the door. Honestly evaluate what you bring to the table. Honestly evaluate what your needs are. And then if you're a rookie and you're looking for experience as part of something that someone brings to the table, then there's all sorts of ways you can structure that and just tell the more experienced investor, this is what I'm looking for, a little bit of mentorship, or to just tell them what your expectations are. And as far as the value you bring to that person, at least in our context, you have to bring the deal, right? So if in this market, if you find a good real estate deal, but you're not sure how to put it together, you're not sure, you want some experience on there, bring that deal to the partnership. That's really the big value that you can bring, is finding a deal. So my advice, if you're looking for a partner, is one of the biggest ways to spend your time is in looking for that deal. If you look for the deal, then it's going to be very easy to find a partner, because you're bringing so much value to the table in that first deal. And you don't have to structure it as a partnership either. You can wholesale the deal to the person, but just say, hey, I'm going to wholesale this deal to you, but one of my conditions is that you kind of let me see behind the curtain and see everything that you're doing. So you can still get kind of the partnership benefits of that experience without having to actually joint venture or partner with somebody.
I want to kind of shift this to seller financing, because we just a couple of days ago, I had a long discussion about it, and you guys, I know, are the seller financing kings. So let's hear some advice for rookies about approaching someone about doing seller financing. If they don't have in the listing that they're going to offer that, what are some ways that they can bring it up to them?
Yeah, the first thing when it comes to seller financing is know who you're working with and whether or not it's appropriate for them. So I get very philosophical when it comes to seller financing. You don't want to ask a 40-year-old who just inherited a property to seller finance, right? A, they're probably going to have completely different financial goals. B, they just inherited, so they got stepped up basis. They have no capital gains issue. And C, they usually want the money so they can go do something with it. That's very different than talking to a 70-year-old person who has a portfolio that has no desire for money. They don't want to pay taxes. They've got capital gains that they're looking at. They just want out of the management. So you have two different type of mentalities that you're negotiating with. And so one of them is ripe for it and one of them is not. In the first scenario, a 40-year-old that just inherited property, we probably won't even talk about seller financing because it provides very little benefit to them. On the 70-year-old with a portfolio, I won't even talk about a cash offer because I know that provides less benefit to them. So knowing your seller and knowing their demographic is where it starts from. And then on the philosophical approach, one of the biggest mistakes I see rookies make when it comes to seller financing is they're asking. They come to the seller in a scenario of, oh, will you finance me? I need you to finance me. And what we do is we can completely flip that around. We don't need you to finance us. Seller financing is an estate planning tool for you. So these are all the benefits we bring to the table with this huge reference list of all the other people we've seller financed from. So a successful track record. And here's how we can structure it for you to minimize your tax exposure, put cash in your pocket, keep your income stream exactly the same way, have no costs, no commissions, no more management, all the, the tenants, toilets, and trash and everything. And so you're providing a solution. And when you come into a seller saying, this is how this works for you, then it completely flips their mindset rather than they're looking at, as I'm giving you equity, I'm giving you money, and that is a risk for me. So that really helps get the conversation going and focuses on what it needs to be, not on not putting yourself in a position of I'm not worthy, because a lot of people kind of have that thought process going in.
Tyler is going to share a presentation for us. Even though in the beginning he said I don't have a presentation prepared.
Well, I wasn't planning on it, but yeah, if you let me
please
share my screen.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about seller financing, I was just working on this for something else anyways. So to just piggyback off of what Mike said, the philosophical part of really approaching the seller from what they need and giving it a gravity of honor and respect, that you're saying, like, this is someone's hard-earned money, this is their retirement plan, this is their you know, a lot of times everything they have is wrapped up in the equity of their house. And this picture right here is two actual sellers of ours that we bought their home through seller financing, and just very sweet people that their entire retirement plan was in real estate, and they wanted to do a seller finance deal. We involved their daughter in it, and we worked back and forth to come up with terms that worked for everyone, and it was a great transaction. But I keep this picture up in, you know, back when I used to go into the office, just to remind me that these are real people. These are people that are entrusting their futures with us. So we want to make sure we take the time to craft a deal that benefits them, that meets their estate planning goals, that meets their tax objectives as well. And then just a couple other things on how to kind of pitch seller financing. You need to make sure you understand the terms you want and what you think will work for them. So there's a part of listening, but then you really need to be confident when you present it to them that it's going to be a solution that you think will work for them. So be bold with it, and listen to what they say, and be comfortable bringing them back to their stated goals, and showing them, connecting the dots with how selling it in this way is going to benefit them and reach their goals. And then just make sure you're really educated on the terms that you're offering. Spend the time to really understand the financial tools. And I think a lot of times people get a little, they get in trouble when they start talking about seller financing, but they don't understand the mechanics of what is a promissory note, what is a trust deed, what is a personal guarantee, what the difference between recourse and non-recourse, all the stuff that has to go into actually implementing a safe legal seller carry. You just need to know the mechanics of that ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And then again, with what Mike said, if you don't, if you come with a place of saying, the only way you can do the deal is to do it with seller financing, and this is the only way I can get into real estate, and that's the attitude you convey, then they're going to be immediately turned off to you in general, let alone with a seller financing opportunity. And so you need to be able to convey the attitude that you don't need to do seller finance if it doesn't work for them, that you have other ways to get the money, and that you're going to exceed with or without them. I think those are important, not in a prideful, overly confident way, but you just, you know, like any sales pitch, you have to not come from a place of need. You have to come from a place of that you are, it needs to work for both parties, and you're willing to explore the opportunity. You're not desperate.
The other, to piggy off that, the other thing I like to say a lot is there's for every buyer that's out there, whatever part of your career you're in, there's a seller that matches that. So there are a lot of, you know, like our first two seller financing sellers, they love the fact that they were doing seller financing for relatively rookies in the seller financing world. We see this all the time, even with our brokers, where the message is, you know, someone took a risk on me, they helped me get set up, I'd really like to then pass that on and move that forward as well. So when we did our first seller financing meeting, it was the funniest thing ever. He's like, yeah, you probably, you know, you need a low interest rate and a low payment so you can be successful. So maybe like 3% interest. And Tyler and I are like, yeah, that'll work. You know, and you know, you don't want your down payment to be too high because you're going to have to make a lot of repairs. And we're like, yeah, that would be nice. So there are sellers, like if you've never done a deal before and you aren't confident in what it takes, there are sellers out there that really want to work with that type of buyer. So don't feel like you need to have all this experience. You can fumble along the way and trip and learn lessons and make mistakes. And there are people that are out there that are okay with that. On the flip side, there's sellers that are like, hey, you have no experience. I'm not going to deal with you at all. And if you meet that person, don't let that overwhelm you and keep you from going on and finding that person that's more the pace that you're in. So earlier on, our seller financing was with, less sophisticated sellers as we learned it out. Now we really look for those really sophisticated sellers where we can get really creative with the seller financing, sell the property, keep the money, buy other property with their financing. So it's a world where you just gain more and more knowledge and more tools, and you apply it in many different ways. But the whole thing is just get started, have that conversation, and then you can steer the car once it's moving.
Ashley, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. There's a question in the chat. Are there any resources you would recommend to become an expert in the mechanics of seller financing?
We're working on creating some resources.
I was just gonna say the book we read.
Yeah, like if you and I have some handouts that are just like a real quick one sheet on kind of what those mechanics are and what you should be providing anyone that wants to do seller finance with you. So go to that link and sign up for that Q&A exchange and just ask me for that handout, and I can give you just a easy kind of cheat sheet on what you should be providing for seller financing. It might be fun to just go over a case study with people, and then that can give a kind of an overview of kind of the way we structure our seller financing deals. So I'll just skip.
Does anybody else have anxiety right now looking at all of those tabs?
Oh, and that's just one window.
I think that you have showed me this before. Actually.
Don't judge me, Ashley. Okay, Mike, do you want to go over the Tualatin Triplex one, or
let's go the Tualatin Triplex one.
Okay.
Is that a cuss word in the next slide?
Yeah. Sorry, Ashley.
Oh, whoops! What did I just do? Okay.
I just you talk about this one.
If you go back one other photo, so this is going from really low sophistication to high sophistication. So on the bottom right corner is that crappy triplex. That was the first seller finance deal that we bought, and that was the one where the seller was really just giving us terms, and we're like, yeah, that would work, that'd work. So in this scenario, we agreed to like a $10,000 down payment. He had lived there for a while. He was a total slumlord. He did all the maintenance, mold, rats, bed bugs. We had a commercial kitchen running out of the garage on the left. It was a complete nightmare. So we did our due diligence on it, and it needed a lot of work just to be habitable. And what we ended up doing was we had $2,000 in earnest money in escrow. We were supposed to do a $10,000 down payment. And this is the beauty of seller financing, is everything can change. You can change every single term to work in your fashion. So what we went back to him with after due diligence was, hey, 10 grand down payment is just too much. We've got all this work that we need to put in the property, but what we're going to do is commit to using the remainder of our down payment and that $10,000 initial agreement, that we're going to put that into the property in the first 6 months of owning it. So at the end of the day, what does the seller want? They want collateral. They want customer service. They want a rate of return. They want and collateral that it's secured by. And so there's a couple ways of giving collateral. Down payment gives them better collateral, right? Because there's the value, you give a down payment, it brings their loan to value ratio lower. The other way is to improve the property, make it worth more. And so we went that route, which is we're supposed to give you 10 grand. There's actually only 1,000 in earnest money. So we bought it with 1,000 down and then made that $9,000 in improvements over the period of time. Our price was $254, $225. First position deed of trust. Rarely do we ever put a seller in a subordinate position unless they're less than 50%, unless they're carrying less than 50% of the financing on the scenario. And then we
But
have
for it to work for a seller, for it to meet their goals, typically they're trying to avoid capital gains. So it almost always makes sense for them to be the majority, like, you know, at more like 70% or more. Because if they're less than 50%, they're not saving much on the capital gains front, so it doesn't really help them. So it makes almost 99% of the time, we're doing seller financing with a very high LTV to benefit them tax-wise.
Mhm. And a lot of the properties that we're purchasing, especially now in Oregon, so Oregon passed rent control a couple of years ago. And so we have this structure in our offers a lot of the time, which is we're limited in how fast we can get rent up. And at the end of the day, two things need to happen for everyone to be successful, or one thing needs to happen for both parties to be successful, which is positive cash flow. You don't want to have negative cash flow. Negative cash flow for the buyer is bad for the seller because it makes it more difficult for you to succeed as the buyer, which then is not succeeding for the seller. So we do stepped up interest on almost every property we offer on. And that interest rate is just based on the cash flow. So we work backwards from net operating income. For this one, where the net operating income was, the 3% interest rate allowed it to cash flow. So we did that for 5 years, and then we stepped it up a third of a point for a couple of years down the road. And then this seller wasn't sure when he wanted to be cashed out. We get that a lot. So you kind of set an initial term. We had an extensions built in, and we had even more extensions built in other than that. But essentially, we were going to move it to an index fund after we got to that 4% range.
Are you guys asking the sellers or telling the sellers or recommending that they go talk to their CPA
All the time.
about
Yes.
this?
Yeah. So
That's one of the best ways to kind of start the conversation sometimes is just asking them, have you talked to your CPA about how this sale is going to affect your taxes? Mm-hmm. And then let the CPA introduce the problem so that you're not being seen as introducing a problem and kind of manipulating a solution. If you can get someone else to introduce the problem to them, then a lot of times they're more willing to hear you out.
Yeah. CPAs are typically allies. They try to keep the deal together. Attorneys try to kill the deal. So CPAs stay in their lane. They're strictly financial advice. Lawyers think that they're lawyers, brokers, accountants, all those things. So we do get lawyers involved because they need to review the paperwork, but start with the CPA because they'll help keep the deal together. They'll get the seller excited about it. And then when the attorney tries to turn into CPA, broker, and all those things, they're already relatively committed because they're seeing the financial benefits of it. A story recently on a seller, Carrie, a guy was really adamant about cash. A friend of mine had been talking to him for 4 years trying to get seller financing. I was able to just show the benefits, got him in escrow in 2 days. Then he had his attorney review all the paperwork, and the attorney tried to turn into a CPA. We scheduled an appointment with the CPA, and the seller was really reluctant to go in. So we had an escrow, a 5-year agreement. By the time the CPA was done, he was like, well, maybe we should do 10 years instead of 5 years. And so the CPA not only sold him on, this is a really good structure for you, but really you should be considering a longer term maturity date rather than looking at a 5-year balloon payment. So CPAs are super helpful in getting seller financing done because they understand the benefits and they can explain it to a way that the seller can understand. And it's typically a person they trust.
There's a question in the chat. Can you talk about how they avoid capital gains, or are you just referring to deferred capital gains?
Yeah. Deferred. Yeah. They can't avoid it. It's a deferment strategy, not an avoidance strategy.
Kind of in the same boat as 1031. You're kicking the bucket down the line, but it allows you to actually make money on your money versus taking that tax hit, reducing the amount of working capital you have, and reducing your yield. So it extends the lifetime of their yield that length of time.
And a lot of sellers are pretty sophisticated. So to what Tyler's point was, we bought a property last year, seller financing. It was $340,000. They had a $400,000 cash offer on the table. And so when we went and sat down on their $1 million property outside next to their new pickleball court, and we gave them the offer, they're like, well, we have a $400,000 cash offer. And then that's what the husband said. The wife runs inside, grabs a calculator, comes out and goes, oh, well, this would be a bigger payout over the 10 or whatever, 15 years that we offered. So they understand the benefits to delaying the cash payment and what that does to an overall wealth building and income level. So rarely does that become a problem. And then also, when it comes to capital gains, a lot of people don't understand that if you're in the lowest income tax bracket, the capital gains rate is 0%. So if you structure it as an amortizing, a fully amortized loan, it's possible, if they don't have any other sources of income where they're just on Social Security, that you can get those payments and that income to a level that keeps them in the lowest tax bracket. And then they are literally paying 0% capital gains tax.
Or a lot of times we structure it where the timeline has to do with when they plan on retiring. So even if they're not going to zero income tax bracket, they're going dropping significantly in their tax bracket after retirement. And so it's much more strategic to take the capital gains at that time than right when they want to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The biggest problem is when you sell a property for cash, now it puts you in the highest tax bracket. So now you're paying the highest rate of capital gains tax. And then
let's talk about how we sold that triplex and moved his note.
Yeah. So we got to the point where those tenants were paying the rear end. We didn't want to own that crappy triplex anymore. So we put it on the market, got a good sale for it. And then we got to the point where now we're paying off the seller, right? So you're paying someone off that now they're looking at a huge tax gain. They're like, well, I really like this income. I don't want a whole bunch of cash because I got to give a third of it to the IRS. And so while we were selling that other triplex, we had this other new triplex in escrow, and this was a cash transaction. So we just went to that seller, and the beautiful thing about seller financing is, what do they want? They want customer service, they want a rate of return, and they want collateral. So we built up a relationship. I think we only owned that other triplex for like 2 years, but we built up a relationship with that seller. He knew us, trusted us, liked us. And so when he went to him and said, hey, here's your options, we can pay you off, or we can just take your promissory note, keep the terms exactly the same, sell the first triplex, have the cash from that sold triplex move to escrow on this new triplex that we're purchasing, and then just keep our seller financing in place. So to the new pretty triplex, that seller's getting cashed out. That's what they wanted. But our old seller financer is now not getting cashed out. He just has different collateral. And what's beautiful in that is, so we owed him like 250 grand. We had this new triplex in escrow for 220 grand. And all he wanted was, yeah, just pay the note down by 10 grand and I'm happy. So when we closed the first one, we paid him 10 grand, lowered his promissory note from 250 grand to 240 grand, which meant we were bringing $240,000 in cash to this new escrow, but only had to pay 220 to buy the property. So we put 20 grand in cash in our pocket. So in those two closings, we made like $100,000 on the sale of the first triplex, $20,000 in equity coming out on the new one. So we were able to buy a property, put 120 in our pocket, and then actually increase our cash flow. And all that comes from just a relationship with the seller of being sophisticated and knowing, I don't want to get cashed out because that puts me in a position I don't want to be in.
And the great thing about working with seller finance versus a bank is that there's typically no fees involved, right? So we had no points that we had to pay. There's no baked in fees anywhere. And when we did transfer his note and he asked for that $5,000 payment, that was a principal reduction payment. So that just went down to lowering our note. And so we were essentially able to finance two transactions with no cost of the financial fees that you typically see in a transaction. And we don't even have to pay anything in terms of like a refinance. It just completely free financing except for the interest. And anytime we do any sort of payment when we transfer a note to someone, it's always a principal reduction. And that always makes sense to the seller, that no one even thinks to ask us for fees, because they are looking at it as a collaborative partnership, they don't look at themselves as a lender like a bank or a hard money lender. They look at it as an installment sale. All right, do you want to?
Thank you. Did you have more you wanted to go over that?
I was gonna skip to this one other one here.
And then installments. So whenever I'm negotiating, I never say seller financing. So kind of a tip there for negotiation. It's always installment sale. Two really purposeful reasons. One, the tax code calls it an installment sale. So you're just using the verbiage that a CPA is going to use and the IRS. And two, seller financing is you're asking them to finance you. Right. So again, that philosophical, which is, hey, we're going to give you the option of an installment sale, which is amazing for you. We're not asking you to finance us. So the verbiage really matters in setting that relationship up.
So this case study, the seller is named Mike. So we call this Magic Mike's Marijuana Castle. So when we bought it, it was a hair salon. And we knew that tenant was leaving, I believe. Or they were like struggling to make their rent. So we bought it because the seller wanted to do seller financing. It was a commercial property. It was our first commercial property, and it was pretty far out from where we normally invest. It was like half an hour, 40 minutes away. But because the terms he was offering to us were so good, we decided to jump on it, even though we didn't know how we were gonna get a new tenant in there. We had a huge learning curve, which we typically only jump into something with outside of our wheelhouse if there's just an opportunity you can't refuse. And this seemed to be that. But the first 6 months, we couldn't get a tenant in there, and people kept dumping garbage in the parking lot. And we kept having to drive all the way out there to clean it up, and we couldn't get it leased. And we were like, what? And we kept paying him this interest payment on this vacant property. And we started questioning what did we do here? And then something changed in Oregon, and I bet you guys can guess what it was. It was that marijuana became legal, and all of a sudden, or dispensaries became legal, and all of a sudden, this property became fit all the criteria. And so all of a sudden, our phone was ringing off the hook with people wanting to rent it as a dispensary. Mike, do you have anything else to add at this stage?
No, I think we're kind of running up against a time.
Okay.
Yeah, I only booked you guys for 45 minutes.
Okay.
So Haley's going to yell at me.
Awesome. All right. So in the end, we ended up turning it into a lease option. And so it ended up being one of our best cash flow successes because the dispensary owner was willing to pay so much for that lease option that we got an above normal, basically income stream from it for quite a while. And just recently we ended up letting her exercise that option and selling it to her for a good profit. So these are the kind of opportunities that allow us to get into kind of new profitable real estate transactions because the sellers are willing to collaborate with us.
Mm-hmm. Less resources.
Return on this, we had a net cash flow of about $4,500.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Sean had put in the comments, any books suggested on this topic.
Yeah, one of our friends, Neil Collins, wrote a book called The Savvy Seller. It's like 36 pages. You can get it on Amazon for like $1.99. It just talks about seller financing from the benefit of the seller. So it's kind of a perspective of the seller. So that's kind of,
I think they actually wrote it as a tool to give sellers,
Interesting.
to educate them to help the pitch go better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Savvy Seller on Amazon, and then Tyler and I will be writing a book and we'll get that out. You guys can buy that. It'll be amazing. It'll be so amazing.
Seriously, if you have specific questions about seller financing, please follow that link and email us with your questions, because as we're kind of writing our content, we want to know what questions you guys have, and it's worth our time to spend time answering those questions. So please, if you're interested in seller financing or anything else really, but specifically seller financing questions, shoot them our way and we'll get back to you.
I put the link in the chat again if you guys want to click on it if you didn't get it in the beginning. I also will put it in the Slack channel too. And then the recording of this, I'll put in the Slack channel too. So everybody can check it out and review it back if you want. Jennifer actually accidentally sent it to me, but she said she'll send over a potential deal she's trying to put together.
Cool.
Or maybe that was to me. Or maybe she's gonna sign up for the link and come bring it to you guys to ask questions about. So that's great.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for joining us. And everybody else, don't forget that at 6 p.m. Eastern, we have a happy hour with Tyler Madden tonight, too. So don't forget to come back with your beverage in hand. Okay, Mike, Tyler, thank you so much. This was really great.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Ashley. Adios.
Bye.